stuff. We'll take our stuff, and we might take our shirt off and just let it hit the floor and, you know, go on about our way. But surely if you borrowed your friend's shirt, you're not going to just throw it around like you would your own. You're going to take better care of it simply because you want to give it back to that person in the same or better condition that they gave it to you. So Yahweh has challenged us to take care, and that's why he said, keep the Sabbath. Guard the Sabbath. With all diligence we need to do that. So we're going to look at, because there's something that comes in, because we understand what the keeping of the Sabbath is, although sometimes we don't do that. When we don't, then it's just simply called disobedience. So we're going to look at what is obedience and really look at our freedom inside of obedience. One of the prevailing teachings of the day is that there is bondage in the keeping of the Torah. That there is bondage as it relates to honoring the laws of God. That you are in bondage when you keep those laws, and that those bondage chains have been broken. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Again, I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail in the essence of time. But I will next time I teach, come back to it and we'll dig a little bit deeper. We're going to look at that. So is obedience to Torah bondage or is it freedom? Is it bondage or is it freedom? And that's what we're going to look at. I'm going to use one quick example just to kind of set your minds in a certain place. Let's just, everybody for the most part in here are either parents or have at some point parented in some type of situation or setting, whether that is caring for a child, whether that is taking care of a little brother, a little sister, a niece, a nephew, a child where you were in charge of making sure that child was kept safe and was either returned back to their parents in the same safety, or you are that child's parent and are responsible for making sure and ensuring their safety. Now, let's look at this. Typically, if a child, and I'll use myself for example, and there's one particular situation I'm going to actually use. I asked my father and my mother if I could go to this party. I was in high school, and they told me no. Told me I couldn't go. I wanted to go to this party bad. I mean, I just wanted to go. All my friends was going, blah, blah, blah. And all the questions that they asked me, I must have answered them wrong. Because their conclusion was that ain't someplace where you need to be. In my mind, I did not understand their reasoning. So what did I say? You guys are putting me in bondage. You making me follow this rule, this law, of not going to this particular party is putting me in bondage. I can't do what I want to do. Okay? Now, if I make the choice to be free, to not be in bondage, and to do it anyway, what is that called?
Disobedience.
Disobedience. Now, typically, now again, I'm in high school. I'm 17 years old. You know, what's going to happen if I'm disobedient?
Penalty.
Discipline, penalty, punishment. Typically, what does punishment look like for a 17-year-old? Take away stuff, right? So now, you can't go outside. Well, 17. You can't, like, go way out. You got to stay around the house and stuff, right? You can't play your PlayStation. You know, for me it was the Sega Genesis.
Right.
You can't play Sega Genesis. You can't watch your favorite show. You can't talk on the phone.
Wow. That was a big thing.
So then you had to figure out, because we had pages, we didn't have cell phones. We had pages. So you had to figure out how to have whole conversations on your pages, because you didn't want to be heard talking. So, now, what happens, my disobedience causes further bondage. Now, let's think about this. My parents who have a totally different outlook on my safety, my protection, and on life at large, told me that I could not do something. The same something they knew was actually putting me in bondage. The something that they knew would actually make me in a place where now I'm subject to things such as danger. You know, it could be people getting fussing and fighting and shooting and all that kind of stuff. I grew up in D.C., by the way, so we ain't talking about, just going to the field to do a bonfire. We're talking about everybody's walking around with a gun. We're talking about territorial wars that you wouldn't believe. Neighborhoods, not neighborhoods that differ by miles, neighborhoods that differ by a street. There's a alley. One faces the other way, the other house faces the other way. Those are two different streets. There could be two different crews. That short a distance, you have to be careful. I used to have to take a bat to take the trash out, taking it into the alley. Okay? So realize that they understood all of this a little bit better than me, even though I was 17 and I had to, go about and know how to handle myself. But they knew that there were certain places I didn't need to be. I felt like them putting that rule on me was bondage, right? So what was their result? Instead of me, myself, being in bondage, quote unquote, I wanted to be free and go. So in order for me to be free, I had to go in my mind. In my mind, my freedom was going. They knew and understood that my going was actually bondage. Okay? And I promise y'all, this makes sense after we get to the scriptures.
Wow.
So their knowing that me going is actually bondage, they took the approach that every parent would take. You're on punishment. Not only can't you go there, school is out at 4:15. If you're not home at 4:45, we hunt you down. And when you get here, you don't leave back out until it's time to go to school again. So now true bondage comes in that they are going to make me stay in a place of protection. And they're going to, in quotes here, put punishment and penalties on me for my disobedience. Okay? So now my disobedience has caused real bondage. My disobedience has caused the very bondage that I was quote-unquote running from. Okay? Alright. So now, let's look at something. Let's look at something. And one other example. How many of you know that if you're, I don't know how high a plane flies, 20,000 feet in the air, that typically you don't just walk around, right? Right? You don't typically walk around 20,000 feet in the air. But if you're in the protection of an airplane, what do they say? You're now free to move about the cabin. That's what we're going to talk about. Us moving about the Torah within the confines of itself. And that's what obedience is. So let's go to Deuteronomy 6. Let's go to Deuteronomy 6. And we're going to do a little bit of reading here. Deuteronomy 6, we're going to start at 16. We're going to end at the end of the chapter, which is the 25th verse. And for your information, what we quote every week for Shabbat is found in this reading. It's a little further up, and it starts at chapter 5. Is what we quote every week. So that's just kind of a sidebar. Get that in your mind, get that in your spirit. Just read it. Read it throughout the week so that when we come together, this is something that we quote. And if you and maybe I'll go back and get a teaching on this passage, the Via Hafta. But that is very critical reading of Scripture. So just understand that that's where we're starting from. We just got finished with the Via Hafta, which has told us that Yahweh has written His laws upon our hearts. We're in Deuteronomy, y'all. We're not in Matthew. We're not in John, Luke. This is not Acts. It's not Hebrews. We're in Deuteronomy. Okay? He said that He wrote the Torah upon our hearts in Deuteronomy. Okay? And then he told us the reason he did that is so that we would understand them, that we would teach our children in every facet of life. Okay? Now, we've gotten past the part where he's called us to obedience. Now, let's start at verse 16 and let's read. Chapter 6. Chapter 6, verse 16 down through 25. And it reads, "Do not try Yahweh your Elohim as you tried him in Massah. Diligently guard the commands of Yahweh your Elohim and his witnesses and his laws which he has commanded you. And you shall do what is right and good in the eyes of Yahweh, that it might be well with you. And you shall go in and possess the good land which Yahweh swore to your fathers, to drive out all your enemies from before you, as Yahweh has spoken. When your son asks you in time to come, saying, what is the meaning of the witnesses and the laws and the right rulings which Yahweh our Elohim has commanded you? Then you shall say to your son, we were slaves of Pharaoh in Mitzrayim, and Yahweh brought us out of Mitzrayim with a strong hand, and Yahweh sent signs and wonders, great and grievous, upon Mitzrayim, upon Pharaoh, and upon all his household beyond our eyes. And he brought us out from there to bring us in, to give us the land of which he swore to our fathers. And Yahweh commanded us to do all these laws, to fear Yahweh our Elohim, for our good always, to keep us alive as it is today. And it is righteousness. And it is righteousness for us when we guard to do all this command before Yahweh our Elohim as he has commanded us. So again, remember that we just got finished with the Via Hafta. Yahweh has commanded us to teach this diligently to our children. And then here we read in later verses where he says that when your son, because you're teaching this to your children, so he's already established that. Now he's assuming that you've been obedient to it. And he says, now when your son asks, why do we do this? Then you tell him. Now let's look at this verse 16. And how that starts out. It gives us a little clue there. And the clue is, do not try Yahweh as they did in Massah. So that says to me, we need to see how they tried him at Massah, right? Because he's told us not to do that. So let's flip over to Exodus 17. We're going to read verse 2 and 3, and that will give us a quick snippet of what actually happened and what he was speaking concerning Massah and what they did. So in chapter 17, remember we are talking about the children of Israel as they are coming out of Egypt, and they're exiting their affliction and their place of bondage. That's what you want to keep in mind. They are exiting their place of bondage. Okay? They are exiting their place of bondage. That is a key for us to understand exactly what I'm wanting to get across. So verse 2 and 3. Chapter 17 of Exodus. And it reads, therefore the people strove with Moshe and said, give us water to drink. And Moshe said to them, why do you strive with me? Why do you try Yahweh? And the people thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moshe and said, why did you bring us out of Mitzrayim to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst? So, let's think about what's taking place here. First of all, and Moshe said this in another part of Scripture, when they're grumbling against him, their grumblings are against Yahweh. Right. Because Yahweh made the command. Okay? So, What they just said is, why did you take us out of Mitzrayim? That is a serious smack in the face.
Right.
Because they grumbled and cried, and it says that groanings went up before Yahweh. And they were made free from their places of bondage because He heard their cry. So this very people are now saying, why did you free us? Why did you free us from bondage? That is a slap in the face. Why did you free us?